Welcome to No Code North, and if this is your first time here, welcome to the Lodge. I'm Penny Olorenshaw, a Webflow dev in Eastern Ontario, one of the co-founders of No Code North. In the background, Jeremy Leroux, our Vancouver member or leader, is running the stream for us, and our third co-founder, Maggie Monceau, is not able to join us today, but if she was here, she'd be telling you about the Toronto Webflow Conf watch party that we're holding on October 15th. So hopefully you can join us if you're in the Toronto area. No Code North is a Canadian community-led project with the goal to connect, listen, and learn from our peers. We want to grow Webflow and the no-code world with you. We host workshops, demos, panel discussions on Fridays at noon Eastern in the Lodge, which is our very cool gather space designed by Maggie. And once a month, we host the Northern Showcase to feature Canadian Webflow talent, Webflow and no-code talent on our YouTube channel. This week, we've invited 3 experts in search engine optimization to discuss where SEO is at in 2024, how they think AI affects SEO, and most importantly for our community, what we need to know to deliver the most benefit to our Webflow clients. If you have questions, post them in the Lodge chat or in the YouTube chat. So let's meet our panel, but I'll warn you, first of all, that one of our members is having some internet issues, so he hasn't been able to join us just yet, and we'll introduce him when he does. So first of all, we're going to meet Alex Lathery, who is a Webflow Premium Partner who runs Blue Collar Builds, specializing in web design and SEO for home services businesses. Over the past 3 years, he's built over 200 websites for clients spanning nearly every blue-collar industry, such as electricians, plumbers, HVAC cleaning, and more. He also runs a few local lead generation websites that he uses as a testing ground for website and SEO tactics for his clients. And someone who needs almost no introduction to the Webflow community, search historian. Aiva, aka Search Historian, is a Webflow SEO expert and content strategist who spends his days inside Webflow CMS. He runs Content Nest, a Webflow SEO and website management agency. He's also known for his Webflow memes by the Webflow community. And Shane has joined us. Welcome, Shane. Your timing is perfect. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Oh man, I owe so many apologies coming into this thing.
That's okay, not to worry. I'm just going to go right into introducing you, and then we'll take it away. Okay, so Shane Veldhuizen is the digital director and owner of Arrival Creative in Orlando, Florida. Shane is a longtime Webflower, marketing professional, and passionate problem solver. Early on, he was employed in diverse fields from the medical device industry to the world of nonprofits, and launched his business, Arrival Creative, full-time in January of this year. Yay! SEO has always been a passion of his because without it, web development is akin to building a brick and mortar business in the middle of the desert and expecting great things. Who cares how 3D and delicious your website is if it's invisible to your customers? Shane is married and has 3 rambunctious and ridiculously fun kids. And welcome to all of you. We're really excited about having you. This idea came to us back in the spring, and we thought an SEO panel, because this is the thing that people still have lots of questions about, and it's one of those things that changes, as time goes on, technology changes, and what Google does changes, and now we have AI. So I thought I'd start with a quote that I came across. SEO is changing in 2024, urging content to become more user-oriented, honest, and, well, human. So my first question to you is, have you noticed user behavior and search intent evolving in the past couple of years? And what do you think that means for SEO strategies that may have worked in the past and might not in the future? So whoever would like to jump in and take that one to start with?
I will go ahead and jump in and give the local taste. So
all right.
I got into SEO, and a little bit of a backstory. The first thing that I wanted to do was I was doing web design, I was doing development in Webflow, and that's all I did. I did that for about a year and a half, 2 years before I really even started to look into SEO beyond just on page SEO. And so I wanted to go and do something called rank and rent. If you've ever heard of rank and rent, basic principles of the business model is you create a website, it's a local lead generation based website, and you rank it organically with SEO. And then because you're not a fencer, you're not a concrete guy, you fill out the leads and you get them to a local contractor, and you basically take a cut for the lead generation that what you've done. And this was a really big business model for a long time. And over the last couple of years, Google Maps has been around for quite a while, but I think that over time, especially as it's improved and as they've changed a lot on the overall like search results and how they prioritize things, where ads go, where the map pack goes, and where organic results go, that model has been affected in a really big way. Because where in the past you could probably get a decent amount of leads just based off of ranking number one from like the organic search position, now you have LSA at the very top, you have Google pay-per-click ads below that, you have the map pack below that. So if you wanted to rank organically just like your website, you're down half the page already or more. And that's not even kind of taking into fact that someone can click on the map pack and see more businesses. So 70% or more is kind of my intuition is going to the map pack and going to those ads. And so you really can't get nearly as much traffic as you used to be able to get just with like natural organic ranking SEO. So what that means from a local perspective is that if you really want to deliver results for yourself or for clients, you really have to prioritize the local side first, which is similar, but it is a little bit of a different ball game. But that's become more of a priority and more valuable to those kinds of clients than really anything else. Like the traditional trying to rank just the organic, results by themselves is not that valuable anymore, because most of the leads are coming from the map pack for any kind of local service business. And so shifted where in the past you could get all of your leads that way, just doing SEO, playing that kind of game from the organic search results. But as again, the map pack and the Google Maps, Google Business Profile product has evolved, they've really prioritized that, and people have really started to adopt that from like a user perspective.
Very true. Very true. Shane, you're nodding your head quite
Yeah.
vigorously there.
Well, yeah, I'm a head nodder. I got that from my mom, but I think, yeah, she's always very agreeable, which is great. But I think that that's a good thing to point, especially because I mean I'm kind of new to the completely new actually to the No Code North community, but I'm assuming it's a lot of Webflow people and whatnot. And I think stepping sort of outside of what you can do from an SEO perspective in Webflow to then trying to really learn what can be done in Google Maps, or maybe another way to put it would be bridging the gap between whatever you're doing on your website and in Maps and really all sorts of local directories, whether that's Yelp and otherwise. It feels like you're changing maybe your core service or something to be, I'm a Webflow person or I'm a web developer. But if you can just start getting outside of your comfort zone a little bit and start to really learn to some of the best practices in those areas, it becomes a real value add in terms of when you talk about like a sales discussion with a potential client, and you start talking about how you're going to consider not only if their website looks good and has all the right metadata on it, but also extend that into these other places where they're listed. And Alex I think makes a really good point in terms of the amount of people that are finding you are probably coming through those sorts of channels. They may be validating your services through your website, but a lot of times with local businesses, they're finding you initially on places other than your website.
That's very true. Very true. All right, Aiva, you're in a different part of the world than our other two gentlemen, and you tend to work more in e-commerce, as I recall. Is that true?
That is for the most part, but recently I remembered how much I love ecom. So, but yeah.
Okay.
Mostly software mostly, but ecom is not a wrong word either.
Right. So what's your take on how things have been shifting and changing recently?
I think with Google's products maturing, as Alex was saying, like even let's say if we take local, there's more snippets, there's more UI happening before that blue link that we're used to. This is happening elsewhere as well, maybe not as fast. But however, what I'm seeing in the past few years is that um, SEO has this negative connotation from 2012 since semantic search was introduced that is like, oh, it's spammy. Oh, you just hide content with, white content on white body and things like that. Well, that's not been true since 2012, but in the recent years, even those kind of sneaky practices that are not that sneaky, they dissolve gradually really fast. And the reason for that is because um, as more people use and search engines get more data, they clearly started to be able to aggregate that user behavior way much better than it was. And that's not, at least from my perspective, that's noticeable in the recent times. So if you create a really good site, sometimes you rank for very crazy stuff, very hard things, very easily, very fast. But as soon as that data starts pouring in of how users behave there, if you're, let's say your product doesn't deliver, or you're a bit over pushing the boundary of what you're actually offering, or the UI of the product sucks, or something like this is happening, you start losing those positions same way. So basically what I'm trying to say here is what I noticed, it's your argument, Penny's argument for the idea that that SEO becomes more UI and UX driven. That's clearly noticeable in my work for in the past few years, for sure, 200%. Just because now it's no longer a few things which are very hard to comprehend, but now we have way much more computing power, and that's very noticeable. With the advent of AI doesn't only generate content and create sites, which sometimes suck, and in most cases suck, but now even that can be done decently. I've been using AI for content since Jarvis came out in beta, so that's like 3 years probably. I always say 2 years, but I think it's almost 4 now. So yeah, but only recently I found tools that, wait, this is first time ever it's better than just having humans working on this. Not necessarily you still don't need a lot of work, but it's doable. Which that also means that big companies like Google have that access to same type of tech, but for analyzing things, analyzing user behavior, and it's very noticeable. Therefore, so where I'm going with this is, my opinion is that in the recent few years, SEO became a bit more of a PR game rather than just the pure, my website has to be polished, my website has to be performant, my website has to have good content or things like that, just because then you're actually building a brand, and because you want to drive that user behavior, and where everything else comes into play. How do you interact on Reddit? How do you interact on YouTube? How do you interact everywhere else? Link building, it's kind of like part of link building and authority building, right? People are talking, people are coming to your website. But again, because it's clear that SEO now is really driven on user behavior on your website, that means that other behaviors regarding your brand, your name, links to your site, and stuff like that on other websites and in general in the internet, is quite crucial part. And I don't think we yet know how to do all that work, because the scope just explodes in like exponentially based on what it was. But what I think we do know is that those who win actually build an online business as opposed of a website. So that's
Right.
my kind of 2 cents on your idea.
Right. Shane.
Yeah, I'd be kind of curious to get both of your thoughts on this. But I've been trying to encourage. I'm part of various communities, and often, like, similar to what you were just saying, is that a complaint with SEO is that it kind of, it almost feels icky to, especially to some people who have maybe like been professionals on the internet, working on web development for a long time, or even some business owners are like, this is different than what you're talking about, and with the industry you're in. But they're hesitant to invest too much time or energy into it because they feel like you're just trying to game the system. And the more I get into it, I'm actually trying to be an advocate for the opposite, which is that actually SEO is really, it's about people. Like when you're running advertisements, in many ways, what you're trying to do is you're playing a numbers game and a conversions game. You're trying to get your ads in the front of the right people, and that's good. But with SEO, if you're doing it right, what you're trying to do is you're actually trying to answer the questions that people are actually asking. And it's very human centered. And then the actual content you write should be the content and the pages themselves, like you're mentioning, be easy to use, easy to understand, engaging, like just actually interesting stuff. And so in many ways,
Written in human language, right?
Yes.
Written in human language, not corporate lingo or stuff like that. Yeah.
And in some ways, I feel like one of the reasons I'm not like you guys have easily are way more expert level SEO guys than I am. But the successes that I have experienced has been because I am a decent writer myself, actually, and then am able to gear content that I know is gonna talk to real people who want this. And so it's like, if you can be somebody who asks your clients or if you're really knowledgeable of your own business, but if you ask your clients good questions and you really learn deeply about their target customer, and you learn how to speak to them, that's more important than, well, I shouldn't say more important. It's one side of this equation of making sure that you actually rank well, because it's one thing to use all the right terms and to get all your technical stuff right. But if, as you're saying, if people get there and they just don't care and they bounce and they just don't engage with the content, or they don't click deeper into your site, then it's not going to do well over the long term. And so it's kind of this, I don't know, and maybe you're going to get to this, Penny, but the AI discussion has been controversial with some people that I talk to, because they feel like you're going to give that up, or, well, now you're really just relying on the robots to do all the work for you. And anyways, I got some thoughts on that. A little bit of a long-winded thing, but I feel like SEO is the human form of marketing.
Right. Alex, anything further on that, or things specific around the fact you've got quite a niche that you work within?
Yeah, I would say that local is interesting because it's a little detached from that, but not always. It doesn't have to be. In some sense, you do need the content on a local website, and there's only so much you can do to talk about concrete or talk about landscaping. Maybe is one of the more interesting ones, but there are some fields in the home service industry where it's like, really, what are you going to say for 1,500 words that's going to really speak to someone? Or rather, if you think about it from the customer perspective, it's not really like education or interesting content. Like, people aren't typically going to those websites to digest and really read about this information. Like, they want to know from a high level things about the company, like things that would make them trust them a little bit more. And so I think in the local space, at least what you see is the majority of people are not kind of going in that direction. They're really just kind of putting content there. Maybe that's more on an educational perspective and like a trust building perspective. And they do try to game the system a bit more. There's not a lot of brands, especially, as we get bigger into like franchises and so on and so forth, there's really almost none that are doing like a content first brand building exercise. Like, their websites are traditional, content heavy. Let's stuff keywords in there. Let's have 1,000 pages for every single location. Like, it's almost behind the times, which is not surprising because it is local and they usually are behind on a lot of this stuff. And so I think there's an interesting breakaway between like where most of the internet is going because of the SEO trends, but where like the local side of things is kind of stuck. And it's aggravated further by the fact that for them, doing that on the website doesn't really give as much of a benefit as just pouring those resources into ads, which are really obviously prioritized by Google, and then the map pack, the Google business side, where it's like, let's just focus on the reputation. We have the website, and if it's a franchise, they probably have had it ranked for quite a while, and it's pretty old. Or if it's a newer business, really what they're focused on is like, let's just throw location pages out there. We have a decent foundational website. So like, the majority of people haven't adopted that mindset. Not that they shouldn't. And I think that there's a space where they could, especially as you start to get into like the way that I see it going is more in the social media kind of sphere. Like a lot of companies now in the local space are doing TikToks. If they're they're on the roof and they're cleaning off the roof, or they're pressure washing the roof, or they're cleaning out the gutters, and they've got these reels or TikToks that are popping off, and being able to like incorporate that onto the website. That's kind of how I think those businesses bring the user side. Like that's what people want to see, and it's more engaging, and it somehow has to blend with this traditional old world that still works in some way, dynamic of putting a lot of content that's educational and making sure that your keywords are there. So I think it's an interesting mashup where the local space meets where the rest of the internet is going.
Right. And in some ways, it's like the internet has been a bit of a barrier. It's been this place you go to find information about, to find the people who would come and help you at your home if you're dealing with something local. But there was, it was very much, one way to the screen and one way to the screen from the other side, and not really a lot of interaction. But now it's becoming much more of a place where, we build tribes around products, and gather our people and our supporters, our influencers, the people who will talk about what our product or our service, and that's quite different than it was, say, certainly 8 or 10 years ago. All right, so let's move on then to the AI question, because that's obviously the one that everybody, you've all mentioned it, and I think it's one of those things that we can't get away from. AI is here; it's not going to go back in the bottle, and we have to see. So my question around that would be: in what ways do you see AI transforming SEO? Whether it's through content creation or other things that, I think we think of it as in terms of content creation, but what other ways will it affect SEO? Um, Aiva, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I can start. So I think what we're seeing most is that just like, I don't know, with NFTs is a good example. Reality, what it solves is we don't buy video games, right, anymore. There was a time when we would go buy a disc, and we would have the disc, and if the internet's down, we can still install it, we can still use it, we can still play the game. But now, even if we buy a disc, we don't actually buy a disc. We buy a license and a trust token that the developer will keep the servers up for some time, and that's how we pay money. That's why now, I know in California something happened with that. I'm pretty sure Europe is gearing up for this to be like, it's not buy now, it's license now, and that's going to change because that's already been like this because it's a one-way communication. Steam or whoever, PlayStation, or can just retract that right of you owning it any day, and it's on you. You like it's your problem. So so NFTs could have solved that, but we focused on the wrong parts, and it just kind of went through the window. Maybe it's going to come back and it will solve this issue because it actually solves exactly this issue. Because I can sell it to you, right? I could sell my license to you. So with AI and SEO and websites in general, what's happening now, the way I see this, is the same thing. We focus on the wrong part of it, which is, content is expensive. Like the FinSuite SEO guide that we did, and it's not even, like, I would say like roughly 50% of it is not even fully finished and published, even though it exists. Took months and months of work, like months and months of multiple people working together to get something like this concrete out of the window, trimming down the details, removing the fluff, and keeping it as straight to the point and as possible. But with AI, you can generate same, I don't know, 70,000 words in like a matter of 2 hours and publish them, and they will work, and actually they will rank. That's the worst part about this. So what happens is, I think we are now in this Wild West time where people focus on what was the issue, right? Where they can cut costs, and this is an insane cost to cut, like insane cost to cut. But in reality, I think what will happen is Google is finding that they are not against it as an AI generated content. What they're against is don't have bullshit on your website. And with AI, it's a hit or miss, and also it just does what it's an attempt. So you can have 7 attempts, and they're all going to be a bit different. But when humans do the same thing, they usually have some sort of pattern that they follow. And AI doesn't. While it seems like it follows the same pattern, but in reality, 7 attempts would still have different outcomes, and with human, they would have almost identical outcomes.
Right.
So
Right.
where we are, I think, is Webflow's Webflow had an acquisition on that front where AI starts to optimize your components, and we're still yet to see that. Maybe in Conf we're gonna see it maybe next year, but and maybe it's gonna be just an enterprise level product because it's not needed for small sites.
No.
Even almost medium sites, it's unusable because you don't have enough data. But what I think when the magic will happen when we will start having websites that change based on user behavior on them and based on the
Yep.
users that are coming in. And this is hard to predict how it works. So I'm excited for that part. I'm not excited for the one where I'm now, again, I use AI tools for content since they appeared. And I was always like, yeah, this is easier to do it yourself rather than to grammar check and logic check a toddler with perfect grammar. But now they're becoming sophisticated because people are creating more complex tools that don't just run the query, but they actually run multiple queries to get
Yep.
improving on itself. And when it does that, then actually you get some decent results. And I already have projects where that works. But what I'm actually excited about is not cutting costs and cutting out like writers and people that make a living out of that. Because what happens is just same like with development, the high-end developers will need their jobs, but everything else can be written by AI. Same here. The high-end writers will need their jobs, but the medium to lower tier, they're not needed because everything can be polished. Like you can send a client your email and pull it through AI first, and it's going to be very clean
Yep.
spoken and all that stuff. So
Mhm.
what I'm excited is the actual Wild West that this will bring. When sites, every time you visit, start changing, and it's kind of against the rules of AI, but it's not against the rules of the internet as we see where it is now and where it'll be in a year or two.
Right.
And that's going to be super interesting because search engines will need to trust websites and their authority, not on the same content showing up every time you visit the same page.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing now. That's why I started with authority seems to be super important. We're still not super sure how to build it, but we know that that's been a thing for like more than a decade.
Right.
Just now, that authority becomes even more important because your name and how people interact with you and how they interact with your business and what they expect, what kind of chatter they do on Reddit or on Discord or whatever. It kind of
Mhm.
becomes a thing of you as an entity. And entity's been a thing since semantic search showed up in like
Right.
2012, 2013. So we're just seeing the next generation of entities. I think this is the third turning of entities, and that one will be super interesting. That's one I'm super
Right.
curious about how it's gonna
Right.
work.
Cool. Cool. Shane, you popped your hand up for a second there. So what's on your mind?
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad I even went first because he said some things I don't know. I'm still like forming an opinion on this, but you said some things that I certainly agree with. And okay, so up until this point, I've been of the opinion that AI obviously is going to transform a lot of things, especially for SEO, especially for any sort of generative content. I think this part that I haven't really thought about much is the essentially using it to optimize things in sort of an automated fashion from a UX perspective, which is pretty like interesting. I'm excited to learn more about that. But regardless of like what it is, like how I'll just say deploying AI or using it, what it is fundamentally is like another added complexity to this thing, this really complex like world of SEO. Like even Alex bringing up, it used to be like you kind of had all these different service pages and locations, and you had thousands of pages on your local service website, and that's kind of how people found you. And now you've got maps that sort of entered into that. AI is just another, well, it's not just another, it's a unique one, but it's a unique complexity. And I think what it highlights is the need for essentially somebody with a directorial capacity to understand two things primarily: all of those different factors at play, whether it's maps or generative content or dynamic content on your website, the customers that you're trying to reach out to, and can like guide a company or a client or yourself through this like really messy place. Because it's always been true, I think, with SEO, that there's no one size fits all solution. And it seems to me that it's becoming increasingly the case that every client you talk to is not going to, and frankly, my website needs a lot of work, because like I've got these like standard packages on there of like SEO services. And the issue that I'm finding is the standard, it doesn't fit. Like everybody I talk to needs sort of a different set of things. Now, some like Alex has done a good job in that he's working with like a pretty well-defined like niche of people, and maybe that's more similar. But I would imagine that even in his industry, there are people he comes across where the strategy is a little bit different. And I'll just say this too: when it comes to like building a website or coming up with like before you even design anything, write anything, whatever, I'm always starting with essentially like a sitemap. And really, I'm starting with keyword research and user research before I put any sort of plan together. And I just think, in general, it would be a good idea for us to spend more and more time trying to understand the ideal user for whatever website we're working on, and then let our strategies, whether it's AI or not, come out of a deep understanding of who our user is.
I agree entirely. I don't think you can really, otherwise you're just talking about features and not benefits, right? If you don't understand who it is that is going to use that service and why they want it and why they need it, you can't really speak to them. Alex, thoughts on AI?
So I think in the local space, really what I'm already seeing, and I think what's going to continue to be the case, is that there's really not going to be any human written content on the website. Maybe like small blurbs that are like, hey, this is like a note from the founder. But for most people, the AI is good enough, and you really just don't need to do a long copywriting process, because the effort that you have to spend to make something like that has to be weighed versus the reach. So how many people are actually going to see this content, and really the impact of it in general. And I think that for local businesses, the reach is not there. Most of these guys are not getting more than a couple hundred visits a month. If they're like a larger franchise kind of a thing, it's a couple thousand. But it's not like a blog. It's not like a startup where they might be getting hundreds of thousands of visits a month. And so the reach is a lot less. The impact is a lot less, because, again, people don't interact with the local service business website the same way that they do a blog, or the same way that they do with like a web application site or an e-commerce site. It's really very transactional, and it's connective. It's like, how can I get enough information to make a purchasing decision and call these guys, or like, book online or get into their funnel. And that's kind of what happens. And so using AI to generate 99% of the content that's already happening, and there's good applications of that, and then there's also bad, because as this really started to populate, there's good applications, people using it to write good content on the homepage and on the About Us page and on the services page. It's like educational, and it has value for them. It has some value for the consumer. But then there's the other side, which is like, a lot of times people still have this notion, especially in the local space, and especially if they're just like the business owner and they don't know that much about SEO. They're like, well, I can just have ChatGPT spit out 500 blog posts about cleaning a house, and I will rank and I will get traffic if I do that. And they'll go do that. They'll just write a very generic prompt in the free version of ChatGPT, which if you know
Yep.
anything about using it for content creation is not that good compared to like advanced prompting and some of the other, even like, I use Kappa AI, which is one of the ones that I use. It's not as good as those. And they have it generate these very basic blog posts, and they've got like emojis plastered here and there. And it's got every heading has like a colon in it. And it's just bullet list formatted. It's so blatantly AI, and it's so bad. That is like the bad side of the AI thing, but it happens. It happens all the time. Agencies do it as well. They're like, hey, we'll generate you like 5 blog posts a month, and they're selling it as this huge benefit and this feature, and it does nothing. It's really like a vanity feature on like their service package, because it takes them 5 minutes to fulfill it, and they outsource it, overseas. And the business owner doesn't know any better. So it
Yep.
kind of has reached both sides, like business owner, agencies. Consumers don't care about it. Nobody reads those, and it doesn't really help you rank. So it's kind of in good forms and it's in bad forms, but it definitely has taken over almost all of the content creation from a local standpoint. The point that I'm more interested in it for, because I do use it for content for local sites, and I think you should. I think it's good enough to do what you need it to do there. The thing that I'm more interested in with AI is like actually on the, next 5 to 10 years. Like, I really think that AI will be able to spit out, an 80% done website or design, and it will help us a lot more from a workflow perspective. I'm already kind of testing this like every single day, like just trying to make, whether it's a logo or like a website design or like a section or, a brand kind of idea of a color palette. I like to use AI for that type of stuff, because I think that that's the cutting edge of where it is. I think that it's, at least for my purposes and like a local side of things, the content creation is already there. It's this next step, which is more like design assets or websites. Like, how can it help you with those tasks? That's, I think, where the frontier is.
Right. Well, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's gonna change a lot, I think, the next few years. Aiva.
Yeah, I have so Alex mentioned that spinning out the whole website, let's say Reloom already kind of does it, right? If we just all need an example that we all understand, right? What I noticed in the past few years, the structure of the site, as in how every page relates to every other page, and how content and headings and everything relates, became harder exponentially to be competing in the same ranks like it was. And we all probably remember days when throwing in a rich text block at the end of the whatever page and filling up with a bit. That's not the best approach anymore. It still works in certain scenarios, but if you really want to be position one, not just and especially if you're fighting like established competitor sites that have like years of history behind them, and you're a new one, um, the site structure game really tough enough, and which I like actually. That's why I love my job even more now, because it was a hard puzzle, and it just now became an insanely hard puzzle that requires multiple people involved, like UI UX designer involved, and SEO strategists or content strategists involved, and it's just, I love that part of it. It's just because, and I know that eventually there will be tools that will help us on that. But now the name of the game kind of changed to be like more user centric. You have to understand both how algorithms work and how people work, and help them both, for the algorithm to understand what you're doing and for the user to actually bring them value. And that was core of businesses since industrial revolution. And now we're only now seeing this on the internet fully in its whole glory, which would basically conclude the Wild West of the internet era over, which started in the 90s. And that's something I really Actually, I wake up every day and I'm really happy about that part. It's sketchy now still, but at least we see like tiny shines of gold here and there of like this is working. Therefore, our internet is maturing as a result of us using it for the past 30 years.
Right. Right. Shane.
Yeah. So I think Aiva, hitting on what I mentioned earlier, but didn't flesh out, which is sort of like a mindset shift, which is, I think you've got all these different facets. And so what you need is, and what I think Webflow developers and designers need to just try to grow in is this idea of being like a director. And the image that comes to my mind, right, is that of like a symphony or an orchestra or a band where you have all these different instruments. And if they were all just there doing whatever they wanted, it would be absolute and utter chaos, which often, if you've ever been in an orchestra, if you've ever played in band, when everybody's warming up and it's just like random noises, it's total chaos. And I think that's what a lot of people's SEO strategy is and sounds like.
Mm.
But then when you get it all working together and you understand, like you were saying, the algorithms, the different tools you have at play, the users, the UX, the design, and you get it all working together, you get something that's unrivaled, at least in my opinion, in terms of like a symphony. And I think that's hard. Again, just trying to speak to who might be listening to this, like as like somebody who's maybe you're somebody who's like more of a designer and you're really good at it, or you're a Webflow developer and you're really good at like whatever, all of the different responsiveness and interactions and all the technical components, and maybe even accessibility. That's another part of SEO that we haven't even talked about, is how important it is to continue to try and grow our sites in terms of accessibility. So maybe you're really good at these things and you're that trumpet player or whatever who's just like, I'm just going to become the best trumpet player in the world. And we need those. But if you're trying to grow in SEO, as personally, I think you have to kind of step back and be like, I'm actually going to lay down my trumpet for a while, and I'm going to try and understand the bigger picture and see how these different tools come together. And that's something I think, obviously, Aiva has done great in that he's working with all these different people and different roles and whatnot. I tend to just try to, I maybe sometimes unsuccessfully, but do a lot of these simultaneously, be a jack of all trades. It's pretty exhausting because you get overwhelmed. But
so true.
That's called management.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask whether, there's just as things continue to change, we've always had, people who focused on SEO. Is the SEO expert or bringing someone else in going to become even more important as, trying to get sites to rank and in the midst of all of this complexity? Is that going to be necessary? Should we be looking at expanding our connections?
I feel like if you're actually going to work with an SEO expert, they almost need to be, or like, I feel like whoever's in charge of your SEO, like there are probably SEO experts for certain things, right? Like certain whatever, like segments within your SEO strategy. But I feel like whoever's at the helm of your marketing needs to understand SEO and how it works. Like it to me, it can't be like, we're going to make a website and then we're going to hire an SEO expert. Right. That's the wrong order. It's got to be the other way around.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Aiva, you just jumped in there again. What you got?
So yeah, completely agree. SEO was this thing roughly 10 years ago, because I have certain clients that still understand it, how it was in 2012, 2014. And around that time, semantic came into play, and that changed a lot. And then there was 3 big, like, exponential jumps of semantic SEO working better and better. And now we're seeing the I think, 3rd jump, which with the advent of AI just becomes insane, because computers understand you better than you do. And that's a weird thing. But what happened was, the way I see this, it's the way I try to treat my clients, and it's quite simple. Let's say you have a client. I'll give an example so that everybody who's listening can understand. Let's say you have a client and they're very good at a brick and mortar business, whatever it may be. They can be a really good salesman and call people on the phone and sell their product, and they can be a wholesaler or direct consumer. That doesn't matter actually. Um, but what they're doing now is their website is there, but now we're rebuilding it, and they have budget for it. And if they have budget for it, that means they're making money somewhere else, and that usually means some sort of what we can call brick and mortar, but it doesn't mean that there's an actual store. It can be an office. Doesn't matter. Um, and what you're doing there is, if you're doing the correct order, first thing you do is you understand the business insanely well, and you force the client to understand their business even better than they do, which they already know very well. But you force them out with certain questionnaires and tasks and workshop things that we do, because people, like owners, tend to think they do 1, 2, or 3 things, when in reality it's usually 20, 30, or 50, or 100, or 300. And that's something they never try to granularly analyze the thing that they do. And once you do that, it starts to shine in all sorts of colors of rainbow. And you're like, did you guys ever thought that you're actually like the core of what you do is because you do this specific tiny little thing different from everybody else? And that's like the thing. So yeah, that's I think where SEO starts. That's sometimes really hard to understand, because SEO, I think SEO word like SEO manager will die out eventually. Um, Especially as internet becomes like, if I can rank you on Reddit, am I an SEO? If I can rank you on YouTube, am I an SEO? If I can rank you on TikTok, am I an SEO? I am. But am I though? And that's where the magic, the shift now is happening.
Right.
It's like an online business manager. That person understands the
I'm thinking
avenues.
like reputation management almost is the word that's coming to my mind as you're saying.
Sorry, what was the word?
Like reputation management almost.
And also business manager, but online business. Because what I was going with this, it's usually that there is for the best projects, there's usually already a business. What you're doing is creating for them a new income stream, which is internet based. And people that run ads do that. People that run TikTok accounts do that. People that run YouTube channels for businesses do that. Doesn't matter where you do it. What you do is you take an existing business, you take an existing product, and you expand it on that front. And that's what I've been, at least in the past few years, seeing more and more. And that's what my guiding principle was. If we can communicate on the level where, if you understand that we're going to basically create a tiny little niche business within your business, because you want to take that, stock market, so internet money, actually Canadians were part of that. So, but yeah, if you want to take that internet money, we will have to create an internet business. And for that, I think like the word SEO will gradually solve into the matters of all things internet, as everything does. Your fridge starts to consider what you're eating and things like that. So all things internet was a tiny trend a few years back, but I think it's coming back with a bang that we don't anticipate. And that one will be, I can market you yogurt through smart fridges.
Right.
Am I an SEO? Probably am, but that just makes me an internet, some sort of businessman, that I can understand how certain thing works and how to get into the right people and how to understand that. And now we're used to that this role was mostly Google, but in the past, like, let's say 5 years, more and more things popped up like that. There's TikTok, there's YouTube, there's other, and YouTube is second biggest search engine. Most people neglect it, but it's still search engine. It's fundamentally, if I want, somebody explain how I can change this specific 1997 car model engine oil, like it's there, like you can actually look for it and find it. And maybe there's not an article.
And I do that all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is like the interesting part, where in this flipping point where we still do jobs, and I think both Shane and Alex and me, we have our own niches, but what we're failing as an industry and as an SEO industry to maybe sometimes understand is that ads were always like a sister, paid ads were always like CPC is like a sister job of SEO, right? It's a different one, and but there's more of these coming up. Like
Right.
it's social media manager was also another sister to the other side, or a brother, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And those were always kind of same level, just different avenues. Where now we're probably going to be getting a bunch of new avenues and real soon, and they're going to be weird as fuck, but you're going to be making money from it. The clients will be happy, you'll be happy, as long as you understand that how
Right.
it works.
Right. Okay, so we're at 1 o'clock, but we started about 10 minutes late. So we'll keep on going for about another 10 minutes. That's okay. That's okay, Shane. Not to worry. We'll keep going for about another 10 minutes on YouTube, and then we'll sort of just, continue on in the lodge if people want to join us here. I'm not sure if we've got folks on YouTube, but I have a question that came in from Patrick. He asked two questions. And a lot of what we've been talking about probably it kind of touches on this, but with the advent of customizing a website based on user activity or history, do you envision a future of customized SEO descriptions? um, uh, Alex, I'm sorry that you have to go. It's too bad. Just see that you just popped that into chat. It was great to have you here. And
Likewise. Thank you
yeah,
guys.
I hope you come back and visit us. We're here every Friday, so
I
we
love
come
it.
out, we hang out and do stuff. So
Thank you guys.
thank you very much. So continuing on with Patrick's question, do you envision a future of customized SEO descriptions or keywords, casting maybe a smaller net but more focused on individuals from case to case? So that's a lot of what we were talking about, whether personalization to some extent, or that changing website. His other question is related to AI tools. Will SEO strategies need to change to adapt to adapt to AI search tools like Arc Browser's summary search tool? I know there's a couple of different systems that are out there that do all the searching and then just present for you. Is
Right.
that going to make a big difference to how we do things?
So the one thing I'll say about all this is what you can count on is it's probably like if we had the same panel a year from now or less, what we would say would probably be different. So like that's what you can kind of rely on. That's the only constant is change. That's true for so many fields. It's especially true for SEO.
Yeah.
Arc search, I thought about this too. I think that okay, this is my opinion, but I don't know how to back it up. But my gut with Arc search and things like that is that pretty much what your SEO, your authority and whatever content you have, you still approach it very similarly because what it's relying on is it's just emulating what a human would be doing still
Mm-hmm.
at this point. And so, but the only thing I would say is, like with Arc search, I use it a lot. I love it. I love Arc search. If it's a really niche, like if it's a really like specific phrase that you ask Arc search to go, like I think I asked it the other day, like show me how, like give me some tips on how to install some very specific thing. Okay, kind of those long tail search phrases. Then you probably don't need to change anything. But if it's more broad phrases, like if you search in like find me the best flooring companies, and that's your search that you put into Arc search. What's going to be necessary if you want to show up, most likely, is that you need to be like at the top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you have like a more niche query, it's okay if you're like a little bit further down, or if your domain authority is not as like high, right?
Right.
But if you're trying to rank for like really broad terms, you're going to have to be like top of the pile in order to ever even show up in something like Arc search.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've heard, tech people talking about, not specifically in the Webflow world, but just in general, is that people will stop going to websites and I find that, even today I was looking for something on Google, and Google has all of those snippets, and as you as you click on one, then it goes and offers you some new ones based on what you just clicked on, and you can get the information you need, and you never actually, you might go to the website eventually, but you might not. You might get what you need and move on, right? Because we're all busy and we can't spend a lot of time poking around on websites. So I think that's going to make it's like, how do you show value to a client then when people don't actually visit the website?
Well, I have an idea about that.
Okay.
So in order for this to make sense, we have to we 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 had social media and marketplaces for a while, but we always treated Google as um, basically as a library, directory of like, if you're in a library and you have to figure out where the book is, there's some rules how to find that book. And especially when you're looking for, so in the libraries, they would have these old drawers where you pull out, then it would look for cards, and
Cards.
it would say,
Yep.
okay, so yeah, on the card, it says all things related to the subject. These are the things. That's Google. That's Google's business model. But internet's clearly becoming more of a mall, where, it's instead of those cards, we have places like Etsy. We have custom marketplaces for custom things that we're looking. And what happens is Google started becoming more of that, and now we suddenly like don't understand what's happening. But in reality, Google is just becoming more like Etsy, right? And life in Etsy is tough, and you have not enough control. And on Google, we felt like we had control.
Right.
So people not visiting your website is the same as having a lot of traffic on Facebook, right? Fundamentally, it's the same. People don't visit anything. They can still buy there. They can message you. They can do a lot of things. So what's happening now is, like corporations are, having their own control. They create a product. If they can attract the user, you don't own the user, but you can provide
Yep.
value for them. And like a good example is I live in the Netherlands, and we have like a local Amazon, which is not Amazon, but we have our own Amazon that works here in Belgium, if I'm not mistaken. And we get everything the next day. Everything works the same as it would work in US and Amazon, with Amazon. But when you're a seller there, it's not that you have an e-commerce website. You have an what's called Amazon account,
Right.
and you play by their rules.
Right.
And you play by their algorithm. And if they decide to sell their own batteries with their own name on it cheaper than you do, well,
Yep.
you're out of business.
Yep.
So I think that's the issue where people get scared now, is that at least before in the wild west of the internet, what I call since the 90s, which I think ended roughly around, well, I can't use that word because it's on YouTube, but we all know that year that lasted 3 years, a few years back.
Yes.
That year. Yeah. So
Yep.
I think Wild West ended back then because everybody was back home, and then everybody started using the internet, and the internet changed a lot because of that, because
Did.
the usage became just insane.
Yep.
It was insane before, but now it became really there's nothing else to do to just be on the internet.
Yeah. And buying the things you need as well, right? It's like you just, so many people got over their fear of buying things online.
And now everybody, I remember myself, I would be before that, I was walking in a store and people would think with their phone, with their watch, which was already, which was super sci-fi back then, before it. And then quite a few people would be paying with their phone, and you were like, yeah, okay, cool, I have a card, it's the same thing, doesn't matter. But during that, cash just disappeared, like just completely
Totally.
disappeared. It existed before that, and you could have opinions about it, and during that time, it just disappeared completely, and it's no longer a thing. So I think what we're facing now is this conundrum of like, what happens if you just play the game, right?
Mhm.
You just part of this game, where you cannot create your own games anymore. A website is your own game. That's
Yeah.
you just people can you make a bad game, nobody plays it. You make a really good website, everybody visits it and uses it and a lot of things. But what happens if you can't? Like what happens if you can just create, your own tiny games on Roblox? I don't know
Mhm.
if this makes
Yep.
sense here. You can
Yep.
only use a platform that already create a game to create your own mini games in it, but not the actual full-on
Yeah.
thing. And the only alternative is to create your own platform, but good luck with that because it's
Mhm.
really run Etsy. Like if you want
Exactly.
to do it, but not a lot of Etsy's out there.
Yep.
So
All right.
that's my kind of 2 cents.
Right. Okay. So I'm gonna let's wrap up the live stream on YouTube, and we can continue chatting here. And anybody who's on YouTube can come to our lodge link if you. I think it's probably